2021 was a really exciting time in sport, with spectators being able to enjoy the competitions like the Euros, the 100 and of course the Paralympic and Olympic Games. And from that came a conversation around inclusion and diversity, with many sports people taking the knee before participating in their discipline. And it's for that reason that British Triathlon have invited me here to Loughborough University. I'm going to explore why triathlon only has a 2.4% membership when it comes to people with ethnically diverse backgrounds, and what it is that British Triathlon are doing to try and improve that and ensure that everyone feels included. Coming into this process, I was keen to get up to speed on the history of triathlon, especially in terms of athletes from ethnically diverse backgrounds. The truth seemed to hit me very early on, with the lack of role models I could find when I searched through the history books. I wanted to begin my journey by speaking to someone who had seen the sport develop and came across one name time and time again: Emmerich Keitel, a coach, tutor and triathlete. And I began by asking about what his role is when it comes to looking at diversity in triathlon.
So at the present moment, I'm sitting on the London region for British Triathlon as a diversity officer. That role became available about 14 months ago. So I've just done 12 months in regards to that. And that's really to try and work with clubs and coaches that are engaging with the committee to try and give them support and guidance in how to accommodate and how to prepare themselves for welcoming a diverse population.
Yeah.
Triathlon has a specific genre of person that goes into triathlon for several reasons, but the main thing is that it's generally white and it's generally middle class or above, who are of high affluence.
And you're fully immersed in the world of triathlon, but can you just go back for a moment and tell us about your entry into triathlon, how you started?
I've been coaching since 1986, hadn't really heard too much about triathlon, but obviously been a running coach for many of those years from the 1980s. And yeah, that's what my first insight was, going to an event. And actually to see the event, it really was, how can I say, quite an experience.
I know for me, in terms of swimming, I do have to think about, okay, have I got the right swimming cap? Am I going to have time to wash and condition my hair? And all of those things actually you have to factor in, and it is quite a process. Okay, so that wasn't the issue for you. But then how did you build swimming in, and how did you then become part of the fully fledged triathlon team world?
Well, it was my girlfriend, now my wife, is to blame, because I was she doesn't drive. So you'll find that to get to places to do training, you kind of need to be going around London or going to different places. So I ended up driving to these places, and I can always remember driving into these pools and going, I'm sitting in a car or I'm sitting in a cafe, and I'm no. And she kept badgering me. And I was going, oh, I can't swim. So then we used to go off to swim. Then she took me swimming on my own. And then she realized that, yeah, it's been many years since you swam, Emmerich. Yeah, you need to do this first. So I always remember swimming the first length, and it would take me 5 minutes to recover. But I was at that time of life where I didn't care. And I was at the time of life of going, I want a challenge. And the one thing I'd say about triathlon, the reason why I love the sport, is because it's a continual challenge, and it's a life challenge.
So I guess finally then, is the future bright when it comes to improving the inclusion and diversity of the world of triathlon?
It really comes down to whether the complexities, aspects of the individual, that's me, being willing to take a risk. I took a risk. Go into a pool. I took a risk going to open water. I took a risk to go out and cycling on roads I've never cycled before. And we're not even, and things like that. It's about, we've got to do that. But what are the constraints? What are the other things that we have to think about? As a national governing body, it comes down to then the people within inside that national governing body. And that comes all the way down to the individual coach. And unless everybody works with the same aspirations, then if they do that, then we can see a brighter future. But it's those aspirations have to be joined together, and that's where the complexity comes in.
Emmerich spoke about the individual taking a risk, finding a club, and putting your trust in the triathlon community to be open and welcoming. I wanted to speak to someone who had done just that, but also to dig a bit deeper into what it's like being one of the 2.4% of people from an ethnic background currently in the British Triathlon membership. I caught up with Maria Gabriels to chat about her experiences of joining her local triathlon club.
It was really good. I was so excited, to be honest, just to be able to find a club, a community that I could just, feel like I belonged to something rather than just being at home with the children. Finally, I needed to see some adults, having some adult conversation, and at the same time, getting fit. So what I found was a bunch of really nice, welcoming people, mainly white, I must say, all of them white at the time, middle age, between 30s, 40s, and white men and white women. I didn't even think of anything by then, because I just wanted to get fit and start training. But then along the way, you can start seeing, okay, so there's no one else like me here. But, I didn't feel for any minute any different from this side. Yeah.
Well, that's really good to hear that you didn't feel excluded despite being the only person of colour within the group. And I think that speaks to the community and the sense of community within Westcroft, which is fantastic. How do you think it would have made you feel if you had seen other people, though, from a similar background?
Yes, I think, it would feel like, okay, somebody else in the same shoes are here with me, we kind of like have some commonality. We can, I understand you, understand me, I think no matter what, you do feel a bit more at home if there's somebody else of your color there, When you finish your race, you then be able to watch everybody else still racing or still finishing or just different phases. And I've realized like once, twice, let me see how many people of color are here today. And you look around and you try and looking around a bit more. And then finally you see, oh, there's one there.
Yeah.
And you feel like, oh, that's so good. I wish I could just go and say, well done, or, but yeah, it's nice to see. I have to admit, it's comforting to see other people like you in the same position when majority of the people are not like you.
Tell me about what you have learned in regards to increasing the visibility of people from ethnic backgrounds within triathlon and what you're doing as well.
So I've attended a workshop with Emmerich, which was amazing. And again, I was the only non-white person in that workshop, which is, again, but I'm glad I'm here. I'm here today. Yeah. I'm glad I'm here today, and I'm representing, my club, not only, but also my ethnicity, which is also amazing. And I was very proud to be invited to participate in a workshop. What I've learned mostly is that we need to educate the clubs. There is a need for a wider information, starting with the committee, starting with at the top, and then drill it down and really trying to educate people regarding minorities, ethnicities, creeds, religions, genders, maternity, marriage, everything. There is a huge scope of things out there that we don't consider when we promote our club. And my place at the club at the moment, I'm a champion for diversity and inclusion, which I'm very proud of. And what we're doing, we're creating a strategy that we're going to bring to the club in order to inform everyone and to spread the words about we welcome everyone from every background, every walks of life. And that's a very important role that I'm taking in. And I'm very proud to be here today. That's what I can say.
So far on my journey of exploring and looking into the triathlon, it's got me to thinking about my own relationship, or really lack of relationship, with triathlon as a discipline. And it's strange really, because I enjoy running, I enjoy cycling. I guess the missing piece of the puzzle for me is the swimming. And I think it's me getting in my own way, and others like me getting in our own way, because there's this perception that black people don't swim. And I think there is definitely historically a relationship with the water and it being a place of peril for people and our ancestors many years ago. And that still, I think, plays into how we feel about the water. Many people, not everyone, but how people feel about the water. Despite, my parents growing up in the Caribbean and enjoying the sea, it isn't just a fun, enjoyable place. It is also a place with, as I say, peril built into it in some respects. So there's that. There's me as a black woman with natural hair thinking, if I go to a pool, am I going to have a cap which is going to stay on my head and protect my natural hair, or am I going to have to go through what is quite a lengthy process of washing, conditioning my hair? And as I say, actually, it's not that big of a deal, but I think over the years I've built up a mental barrier which stops me from thinking that going for a swim is a really easy thing to do. And I think that comes down to a bit of representation, or lack of representation, within, say, the swimming part. The fewer or less black people there are, for example, in a swimming pool, might make it just simply feel like, you know what, it's not for us, it's not for me. That is quite easily fixed, I think, with people doing it, and more people doing it, and more people recognising, therefore, yeah, it is possible. So I'm really interested to speak to people who are in positions of authority, who can actually make an impact and have influence in this discipline, to find out what they are doing, and if they're even aware of some of the perceptions and some of those very specific barriers. Yeah, so knowing that the percentage is as little as 2.4% when it comes to people from minority backgrounds, can you tell us a little bit then about the work that you're doing to help improve those numbers?
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few things going on, and as you can imagine, triathlon as sport, we have a development side, we have a performance pathway side. So it's about how do we as a whole organisation see everything as one. And we're doing a lot around our language and terminology and how we work with communities. We've got our development team working on what we are calling place-based pilots. So that's very much about an asset-based approach of going into communities and actually finding out where their strengths are. So we start from a place of strength rather than going in from a place of deficit. And that very much comes down to language and terminology. So we kind of see the word bandied around quite a bit around how are we going to engage with disadvantaged communities, how are we going to engage with hard to reach communities. And actually, we're really trying to change that narrative in saying they're not advantaged, they've been underserved. And what we now have as an organisation, whether it's British Triathlon, whether it's Triathlon England, or even the wider sports sector, is how do we create equity of opportunity? Because when we do that, what we'll realise is that we've realised that they're underserved and they weren't disadvantaged. So we created, so in one sense, you could say the system and the process may have created that disadvantage. So I think, that's really important, where we've got to get into the heart of these communities. But also at the same time, there's internal things that need to happen. And I would say from my position in the board, it's taken slow steps, but to bring people on that journey all the way from the senior leadership team to those that sit on the board, to say it's not one or two people's responsibility to look at equality, diversity and inclusion.
And I just want to ask you mentioned about underserved communities and that being part of the issue for why there are such low numbers when it comes to diversity within triathlon. Why do you think, are there any other reasons that you think the numbers are so low when it comes to this specific area of inclusion?
I think it's more just about changing perceptions of what people see triathlon as. People actually just need to really simplify the sports at times. Say, well, actually, all we want people to do is swim, bike, and run. And when we go out there and we realise that, what we find is the majority of people in some way, shape, or form are swimming, are biking, and are running. So it's about how do we now take ourselves to their areas, to their comfort zones, and say, did you know that there are other ways that you can swim, bike, and run? So you may have been doing it in an informal setting, from a participation, recreational, grassroots, but there's a way that you can get involved with the governing body, and you can, that we can create all these, whether it's races or these environments, that they feel like, I belong to this environment now. I think there's a huge perception piece that we're going through that needs to happen, and we are on that journey.
And so just looking to the future then, and what are your aspirations for triathlon and for ensuring that it is a really inclusive environment?
I think for me, it has to be inclusion at all levels. So when we talk, I've worked in sport for 16 years now, and I think sometimes we can be quite frontline when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and it's all about the participation, and it's just about getting them through the door. What you'll find is that many people do participate in swim, bike, and run, as I mentioned, or even other sports in some way, shape, or form. Where we really need to focus is how do we then transition them to look at the sports or the governing body as something that they can belong to. And that for me has to come down to the workforce. Is our workforce representative? Do we have activators, coaches, staff within Triathlon England who really understand the communities, maybe even share some of them lived experiences, or at least empathise from a place of empathy, understanding that it's not as easy just to set up a programme and say, right, we're now going to take that to the community. Actually, what we need to be doing is talking to the community and co-producing that programme to get that buy-in from the start so they feel like they have been a part of this process.
It's clear from my chat with Halima that at that board level, there are discussions taking place on how we reach out to some of those underserved communities and getting that message out there that triathlon is open and accepting of anyone interested in swim, bike or run, regardless of background or ability, seems to be key. The lack of role models currently in the sport, however, is something it can't escape from. I was pointed in the direction of a remarkable young man, Sam Holness. Sam is a black triathlete with autism, fighting to become the first professional triathlete with autism in the world. I caught up with him and his father Tony while they were in Las Vegas and asked Sam about how important he thinks role models are for young black athletes starting out in triathlon.
I think that role models can be important. This is why so many athletes from the minority and disability communities play sports like football and athletics. I would hope that my child to become an elite triathlete and to raise the awareness of autism and encourage everyone to try this great endurance sport. So what do you think, Dad?
I mean, there's a lot of work to be done to broaden diversity in triathlons. I don't know if you've seen some of the numbers, Jacqueline. I think it's less than 2% of triathletes in the US.
Oh, wow.
Black background. And it's, I think, similar or lesser number in the UK and across Europe.
Well, I know the membership of British Triathlon is around 2.4% ethnically diverse, so very similar in terms of very low numbers. Yeah.
And at the event we're at, I think I could have counted on two hands the number of, black athletes who were there.
There's this perception, isn't there, around black people can't swim. And there are perhaps there might be some truths in some groups, in some communities. I'm not a big swimmer. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
I think when Sam started swimming, he was 3. So he could swim before he could talk. Yeah. And that is because we also believe that if you can't swim, you will drown. Yeah. A lot of parents on the autism spectrum said, if he swims, he's going to drown. But if he can't swim, he definitely will drown. So we took him into the pool. He learned to swim in an afternoon, took the armbands off, and there's a coach there, and he just swam in like 2 or 3 hours. He was swimming. Wow. And I think we've been out to lakes, open water swimming, and we've had people say to me things like, oh, why can't black people swim? And we're like, he can swim. There is Sam as an example. And there are lots of examples around the world of really powerful, strong Olympians. I think Ellie Atkins is a classic example, who had the world record, breaststroke world record out there. So they do exist. But I think that notion, that perception that they can't swim. As a matter of fact, I spoke to a coach in the US, and he was saying to me the history of freestyle is that it came from Africa.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Because there is the numbers do suggest that it's not that black people can't swim, but a lot of black people don't swim in the scheme of things. Or am I speaking out of term here?
Well, everybody can swim. It's physics. Yeah, that's all it is. Everybody can swim.
Yeah.
What you have to do is get out there and swim. And I think there was a recent article from FINA who was banning black women wearing a swim cap.
Yes.
Yeah. As an example, the sport needs to change. The good thing is that FINA took that back immediately. Yeah. And allowed to a sport. So, we know the history of black women getting chlorine in the hair and cutting the hair and all these sorts of things. We're aware of that. However, what better gift to give to your child than a tool that can save their lives?
And Sam, what would you like your legacy to be in the world of triathlon in the years to come?
So for legacy, I would like to leave is to help broaden the diversity of this great sport and to become the first triathlete with autism to compete in the 140.6 World Championships.
In Kona?
In Kona, Hawaii.
Brilliant.
Well, I think if I can encourage coaches, especially, to include people from diverse backgrounds like Sam in sport, it would be absolutely great. If I could encourage British Triathlon and UK Sport and other bodies to train coaches in identifying talent, I'm here. I'm happy to help to do that, to identify talent who are neurodiverse and then to nurture that talent. I mean, I talk about the things that we do as parents is to create a loving environment for Sam, to create an environment he could thrive, basically. And I think, if coaches can do that, then there are lots. I mean, I know other people like Sam out there who are on the spectrum, who, if they had the right training early on, it would be entirely different for them, I think, in sport.
I had spoken to a number of people across the world of swim, bike and run during my time at Loughborough University to begin to put together the pieces of why there was such low levels of ethnic diversity currently in triathlon. A few of the same messages kept coming back to me: the lack of visible role models in the sport currently, the language around triathlon and how it can feel very elitist, and a lot of issues around perception, the perceptions of both those in the sport and outside around what the barriers actually are. I finished my time in Loughborough by catching up with Andy Salmon, CEO of British Triathlon. I wanted to put some of the questions I had to him. Andy, it's really good to talk to you, and I'm interested to find out what your thoughts are on this figure of 2.4% of the membership of British Triathlon being from ethnic minorities. I mean, it's a very small number. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very low number. It's a very uncomfortable statistic, something that makes me feel uncomfortable, whenever I think about it. But I see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity, it's a catalyst for change. Yeah. And change we need to bring about in order to improve that statistic. And the way we do that, I think, is by growing the sport, but making sure we're doing so in a really, truly inclusive way.
Yeah.
And there are lots of ways that we can do that. And we've just today actually launched our new development strategy in England called the Big Active, which is very much about this, about making sure that we can address inequalities in terms of access to swim, bike and run. So yeah, lots of work to do, but we're excited.
But why do you think it is as low as that? What are some of the barriers, do you think, to people accessing triathlon?
Sure, it's an interesting one because triathlon is a relatively very modern sport.
Yeah.
You know, founded in the 80s. British Triathlon was founded in the early 80s. So there are some things actually we do very well. We're renowned for gender equality. We've had equality of opportunity, equality of prize money between genders right from the very beginning. So that's something that we're very strong on. But as you've alluded to, in terms of ethnic diversity, we're not doing so good. I think there are lots of traditional, outdated stereotypes. You know, this idea that black people don't like to swim or are not capable of swimming, you know, which has been proven to be not the case at all. It's almost self-evident now that that's not the case. So there are lots of reasons. I think also triathlon's been a fairly individualized sport historically, and what we're trying to do is make it much more about community, make it much more relevant to the communities in which people live.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of if you want to be involved in triathlon, this is how you've got to do it. It's more a case if you want to be involved in swim, bike and run, the components of triathlon, then let's find a way that works for you and make it accessible for you. So as I say, lots and lots to do, but we've got a plan.
And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say on the language around triathlon as well, because here it says on your t-shirt, swim, bike, run. And actually that already begins to feel a bit more accessible. You know, I run, I can bike. The swimming bit, okay, I'm trying to be more open-minded about that. But is that part of the plan and strategy as well?
Absolutely. You know, those three words are on the t-shirt for a reason. If you say to people triathlon, I guess, you know, more than half would say, well, actually, remind me again, what is triathlon and which order do you do it in?
Yeah.
But you say swim, bike and run, you've got the three most accessible forms of physical activity in the country. You know, that's clear, the evidence tells us that. So as you say, yeah, that's one of the ways in which we break down the barrier. And we're not saying that everybody should go from zero to doing all three disciplines straight away. Of course they shouldn't. It depends what's on your local doorstep in terms of facilities. It depends what your friends, what your like-minded people are doing, and just finding out what works for you. Yeah. You know, and lots of people, we've seen huge growth during COVID really, in the demand for open water swimming. Now, depending where you are in the country, you know, if you're in the north of Scotland, that can be quite a seasonal thing that you might do. But if you're in the south of England, where it's several degrees warmer, you know, it's something you can do for perhaps 9, 10, 11 months of the year. So. There's lots of opportunities, but it all, as you say, comes back to breaking down those barriers and just making people feel safe in the environments that they're testing out.
Do you have a timescale in mind for improvements?
Yeah, we're just finalising our plans at the moment, and I think, you know, our work will never be done. There'll never be a day we say that's it. Let's go and focus on the next challenge. And if I can talk about diversity and inclusion in its broadest sense, it's something that we're determined, it's how we do what we do. Yeah. It isn't what we do. So every single thing we do should have diversity and inclusion running through it. Yeah. And we were just processing our staff survey earlier on today, and we asked a question about, you know, we have just over 80 employees, and we asked everybody, you know, do you feel as if diversity and inclusion is your responsibility? Yeah. And we were delighted with the result. 99% of people who responded, and we got a really high response rate, said that they felt that diversity and inclusion was their responsibility. Yeah. So there's not a diversity and inclusion department sitting over there in the corner. Yeah. There's every single one of us, very much including me, every single one of us is responsible for driving that agenda. But, you know, to get to your question in terms of a target, you know, we absolutely need to aspire for our demographic profile to match the demographic profile of the country. You know, that's the simple goal. Yeah. Because for every day that we haven't achieved that goal, then, you know, we're failing and we haven't made our sport as accessible as we want it to be.
Yes, it's difficult to, I guess, put a time on something which is evolving. Okay, so if there is someone who's watching this and they're intrigued about swim, bike, run, they're intrigued about triathlon, what would you say to them?
I'd say don't be intimidated. You know, particularly if you've fixed it on that word triathlon. And as you've said, think about swim, bike and run. Think about what might appeal to you. Think about perhaps what you've done in your past. You know, have you run before? Did you swim when you were perhaps in school? And what is the, I suppose, the most appealing of the disciplines to get involved in? And then reach out. You can go to our website if that's one way of doing things. You can find a local club, or you can find a local program. Reach out to your local sports centre. You know, there are all sorts of very local initiatives going on to introduce people to all three of those disciplines. But I think the most important thing, as we've said, is find a friend to go along with, or connect with some new friends, but people where you feel, as I say, you know, connected and safe. And I think that, you know, that leads in a little bit to role models and the importance of role models. And you know, we hear so often now this idea that, you know, if people can't see themselves in their role models, in the marketing literature that's been put out there, that it's almost instantly going to fail, isn't it? So people need to see. So, you know, we've got people like Sam Holness, you know, doing incredible things, and you know, such an ambitious young man, and we wish him, you know, every success. And you know, we've got some wonderful coaches who again are doing some fantastic work to break down these barriers. So yeah, as I say, lots to do, but we've got a great starting point.
Because I've had the chance to have these conversations over the last few days, my perception has been challenged and somewhat changed when it comes to the world of triathlon. In some respects, it feels less inaccessible, and it really does feel like it is just swim, bike and run, and that's brilliant. But it's about others receiving that message and realising that it can be accessible for them too. Having said that, there are still a whole host of barriers and challenges, and that is where the real work will start for the world of triathlon.